The Endurance hung motionless against the backdrop of HD 40,307 grams, its sleek hull reflecting the amber light of the distant star. Dr. Elena Rice pressed her palm against the observation deck's window, watching as the planet's swirling atmosphere revealed glimpses of vast oceans beneath. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Captain Takashi said, joining her at the window. "Preliminary scans show biosignatures. Microbial, likely, but still, our first confirmed exobiology discovery." Elena nodded, distracted by the data scrolling across her tablet. "Something's odd about the chemical composition. These readings suggest silicon-based compounds intermixed with carbon structures. It shouldn't be possible, but..." The ship's emergency klaxon cut her off, red lights flooding the observation deck. "Proximity alert," the ship's AI announced. "Unknown object materializing at coordinates 030 Mark 7. Elena and Takashi watched in stunned silence as space itself seemed to fold, revealing a massive crystalline structure that hadn't been there moments before. The vessel, if that's what it was, shimmered with pulsing light patterns, its surface faceted like an enormous diamond. "It's beautiful," whispered Elena. "And impossible," added Takashi, already moving toward the command deck. They didn't approach. They just appeared. Within hours, first contact protocols were initiated. The crystalline beings called themselves the Vex, communicating through mathematical sequences that the ship's AI translated with surprising ease. They appeared as tall, slender humanoids with skin like polished quartz, moving with uncanny precision. They spoke of peaceful exchange, of technologies that could solve Earth's energy crisis, of cultural sharing between species. But something felt wrong to Elena. The Vex never blinked. They mirrored human gestures with a slight delay, as if studying and replicating rather than naturally responding. And their offers, each one seemed specifically tailored to address the deepest desires of individual crew members, as if they could somehow read minds. During the formal dinner celebrating the new alliance, Elena noticed the Vex diplomat assigned to her, designated 6 Sigma, watching her with particular intensity. "You are concerned," it stated, not a question, but an observation. "Just excited," Elena lied, forcing a smile. "If you'll excuse me, I need to check something in the lab." Instead, she slipped away to the docking bay where the Vex shuttle was stationed. Using her xenobiology clearance, she bypassed the guards, who seemed strangely unresponsive, almost drugged, and entered the alien vessel. Inside, the crystalline corridors pulsed with light that followed her movements. Elena moved deeper, guided by instinct and dread, until she reached a chamber that made her blood freeze. Suspended in transparent crystalline pods were dozens of partially dissected species, creatures unlike anything in Earth's databases, and beside them, newer pods containing familiar samples: human hair, skin cells, blood vials, labeled with the names of Endurance crew members. Her hand shaking, Elena touched a screen beside Captain Takashi's samples. Data flowed: genetic analysis, neurological mapping, behavioral predictions, not the work of diplomatic allies, but of scientists studying specimens. Alarms blared suddenly, the chamber flooding with red light. Elena ran, heart pounding, back toward the airlock. She had to warn the others, had to. She emerged onto the Endurance to find chaos. The diplomatic facade had collapsed. Vex forms twisted into weaponized configurations, crystal limbs elongating into blades and projectile launchers. Crew members weren't being killed. They were being systematically captured, immobilized by shimmering fields. "Elena," Security Officer Rivera called, firing hopelessly at a Vex that seemed to absorb the energy blasts. "The emergency shuttle. Go." With Rivera, Communications Specialist Park, and wounded Engineer Dalton, Elena raced through the dying ship, explosions rocking the corridors behind them. As they reached the shuttle bay, Captain Takashi's voice came over the comm. "Get out, Elena. Warn Earth. I'll buy you time. The last thing Elena saw as their shuttle broke away was the Endurance tearing apart, Vex ships surrounding it like crystalline predators. As a blockade formed to trap them, Rivera punched the engines to maximum. "Slingshot around the gas giant," she ordered. "It's our only chance." The tiny shuttle plunged toward the massive planet, beginning a desperate race for survival. 23 days after escaping the Endurance, Elena and her 3 fellow survivors reached Earth, their shuttle's life support systems on the verge of failure. Their bodies were gaunt from rationing, their eyes hollow from what they'd witnessed. Yet the nightmare had only begun. "They're not listening," communications specialist Park murmured as they sat in a sterile UN conference room, monitors showing simultaneous feeds of skeptical officials from a dozen nations. "The Chinese delegation believes this is an American psychological operation," translated a diplomatic aide. "The Russian Federation suggests mass hallucination induced by experimental propulsion radiation." Elena slammed her fist on the table. "We've shown you the samples we managed to collect. We've provided sensor logs. The Vex are coming, and they don't want allies. They want specimens." Only one person seemed truly attentive: Admiral Wei Chen, architect of Earth's victory in the water wars of the 2130s, his weathered face impassive as he studied their data on a separate terminal. "How long do we have?" he asked simply. "Days. Maybe hours," Elena replied. Their folding technology doesn't seem constrained by distance. 72 hours later, as the Security Council voted on whether to allocate resources to investigate the alleged alien threat, the skies darkened worldwide. Not gradually, but all at once, as if someone had dimmed the sun. Massive crystalline structures materialized in low orbit, positioning themselves over every major population center simultaneously. In Beijing, New York, Lagos, Mumbai, Sydney, billions watched their screens as regular broadcasts dissolved into a single transmission. A Vex form, its crystalline features unreadable, delivering its message with clinical precision. Humanity represents a genetic reservoir of adaptability unmatched in our catalog of 7,281 processed species. Your neural plasticity and environmental tolerance ranges are particularly valuable components for integration. Resistance only damages the specimens. Global military forces launched a desperate counterattack. Missiles turned to dust mid-flight. Fighter pilots found their controls reversed, aircraft turning back upon their bases. Orbital defense platforms, humanity's pride, rotated and fired earthward with devastating precision. Elena watched from the Pentagon's emergency bunker as major cities fell to precision strikes. The Vex strategy became clear: technology centers destroyed, power grids disabled, communication networks severed, but dense population areas meticulously preserved. The harvesting began the next day. Massive crystal chambers descended to street level, paralyzing waves sweeping through crowds. Humans were systematically categorized and stored, not killed, but collected, like biological samples in a vast laboratory. "This is New Delhi," reported a shaken officer, displaying footage of Vex collection teams moving through the streets. "And this is from 12 hours ago in the Alps." The second video showed a mountaineering team fleeing across a glacier, pursuers in crystal form close behind. But something caught Admiral Chen's attention. "Replay that sequence," he ordered, leaning forward. "Focus on the Vex movements." They watched again. The mountaineers, desperate and terrified, made unpredictable direction changes, leaping crevices in seemingly suicidal maneuvers. The Vex, for all their technological superiority, struggled to adjust, their movements becoming jerky, inefficient. Again, Chen commanded, "But focus on the environmental readings." The analysis was clear. In extreme cold and chaotic terrain, Vex performance degraded significantly. They excelled in controlled environments but faltered when facing unpredictable human behavior in harsh natural conditions. "Dr. Reyes," Chen said, turning to Elena, "what's the most fundamental difference between us and them?" not technologically, but biologically. Elena considered. They're silicon-based collective organisms. We're carbon-based individuals. More basic, Chen pressed. What made humans apex predators on Earth long before we had technology? Understanding dawned on Elena's face. Endurance. Adaptability. We evolved as persistence predators. Before we had spears or fire, we hunted by simply outlasting our prey, chasing them until they collapsed from exhaustion, while our bodies adapted to keep going. Chen nodded, the ghost of a smile on his face. For the first time since the invasion began, he looked hopeful. They control our technology, but they don't understand our biology. We need to abandon the tools they can manipulate and embrace what they can't comprehend. What evolution spent millions of years perfecting. He turned to the room full of military leaders. We're not going to outgun them. We're going to outrun them. Outside, crystal ships continued their harvesting pattern, methodical and efficient. They hadn't yet realized that their prey was about to remember what it truly was. 6 months after the Vex arrived, Elena crouched by a narrow stream in the Appalachian wilderness, using a piece of charcoal to write in her makeshift journal. Bark stripped from a birch tree, its pale surface perfect for recording their discoveries. Day 184. 3,000 survivors now scattered through these mountains in groups no larger than 20. Nothing electronic, nothing they can track. We move camps every 3 days, always near running water that disrupts their sensors. The children no longer ask when they can go home. She looked up at the canopy of ancient trees, their dense foliage hiding them from aerial observation. In the clearing nearby, survivors practiced with handcrafted weapons, bows of flexible hickory, arrows tipped with flint and obsidian, spears with fire-hardened points. Their faces were smeared with mud to break heat signatures, their clothing made from natural materials that didn't register on Vex scanners. They had become ghosts. Dr. Reyes, Marcus, formerly a park ranger, approached silently. A skill he taught them all. The scouts returned. The others are coming. By nightfall, resistance leaders from 5 other cells had arrived, having traveled for days through dangerous territory. They gathered around a smokeless fire. 23 people representing over 600 survivors, hidden throughout the mountains. The New Hampshire cell was taken last week, reported a woman with a burned scar covering half her face. Vex found them when someone tried to use a radio to contact family. Grim nods around the circle. They'd all lost people to such mistakes. Elena stood, unfolding a map made on deerskin. Through trial and error, we've identified 3 critical Vex weaknesses. She pointed to different markings on the map. First, their sensory systems cannot effectively process truly chaotic natural environments. Dense forest canopies, cave systems, rapidly moving water. They're designed for order, not natural complexity. Murmurs of agreement from those who'd witnessed Vex units becoming disoriented in such terrain. Second, individual Vex require synchronization with their hive mind every 37 hours precisely. During synchronization, they're vulnerable for approximately 3 minutes. How did you discover the timing? Asked a former mathematics professor. We've been watching and counting. Elena replied simply. For weeks, different teams observing different units. The third weakness, prompted Marcus. Their crystalline biology overheats in extreme conditions, particularly high humidity combined with heat. They have cooling mechanisms, but prolonged exposure degrades their function. As dawn broke, they put theory into practice. A Vex collection team had been detected moving up the valley, following thermal traces from a deliberately set false trail. 20 resistance fighters took positions along the route, communicating with bird calls they'd perfected over months. When the Vex entered a narrow canyon, Paolo, once a demolitions expert, triggered a carefully prepared rock slide, separating one alien from its companions. What followed wasn't a direct attack, but something much older, a hunt stretching across hours. Rotating teams of humans harassed the isolated Vex, never engaging directly but forcing it to continuously reposition through swampy terrain. The summer heat was oppressive, the humidity approaching 90%. By late afternoon, the Vex's movements had become sluggish, its crystalline surface clouding as its cooling system struggled. As the synchronization window approached, the 37-hour mark Alina had identified, the Resistance executed the final phase. 3 teams moving through dense underbrush created chaotic patterns that its sensors couldn't process, while others launched clay containers of fermented skunk spray that blocked its sensory inputs completely. In the confusion, Marcus led the strike team, 4 hunters with stone-tipped spears approaching from different angles. Their attack was coordinated but primitive, powered by muscle and bone rather than technology. The Vex, designed to counter technological threats, had no defense against such ancient methods. When it was over, they gathered around the fallen alien. As Alina carefully dissected its crystalline form, she gasped at what lay beneath, biological components eerily similar to human neural tissue. "It's not just studying us," she whispered, understanding dawning. "It's becoming us." That night, as resistance cells separated to return to their territories, they carried with them not just knowledge of Vex weaknesses, but something more powerful, proof that humanity's oldest hunting techniques, perfected through millions of years of evolution, could defeat technology beyond their comprehension. The hunt had only just begun. 1 year after the invasion, the remnants of humanity bore little resemblance to the technological civilization they once were. In the golden valleys of what had been Yellowstone National Park, a Vex collection unit detected human biosignatures and moved to investigate. What followed wasn't a battle but a hunt, stretching across 3 days of brutal terrain. The Vex unit found itself pursued by humans operating in rotating teams, never directly engaging, but never stopping their pursuit. When the unit accelerated to escape, the humans simply followed its trail. Broken twigs, disturbed soil, and signs invisible to electronic sensors, but clear to eyes evolved to track prey across savannas. "Steady pace," Maya whispered to her team as they jogged through a grove of aspen trees. Once a marathon runner, now a hunt leader, she maintained a rhythm that her team could sustain for hours. They don't understand conservation of energy. They sprint, they stop. We never stop. The hunting party tracked the Vex for 16 hours the first day, maintaining visual contact from a distance. When night fell, they continued by moonlight while the second team rested. By dawn of the second day, the Vex unit began showing erratic movements, its energy reserves depleting without a synchronization cycle. Then something unexpected happened. As Maya's team closed the distance during a pursuit phase, the Vex unit suddenly faltered, its crystalline appendages briefly losing coordination. It recovered quickly, but the pattern repeated whenever the humans drew near, particularly when they reached states of extreme physical exertion. By the third day, as the Vex unit systems showed clear degradation, the humans methodically cut off escape routes, herding it toward a geothermal area where sulfur pools damaged its sensory systems. The final strike, when it came, involved no technology, just stone-tipped spears thrown with a precision that humans had perfected over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. 500 miles away, in a resistance base hidden inside a network of limestone caves, Alina connected a captured Vex communication node to a crude EEG device salvaged from a rural hospital. The test subject, a hunter fresh from a 3-day pursuit, remained in an exhausted but alert state as electrodes monitored his brain activity. There, Alina pointed to the pattern on a hand-cranked oscilloscope. It's unmistakable. Human neural activity during states of extreme physical exertion generates wave patterns at exactly the frequency that disrupts Vex communications. Admiral Chen, now sporting a wild beard and dressed in animal hides, studied the readings. Our brains evolved to enter specific states during persistence hunting. Heightened awareness, pattern recognition, sustained focus. The electromagnetic signatures from these states somehow interfere with their hive mind. It's not just physical endurance that makes us dangerous to them, Alina realized. It's what our brains do during that state. The discovery transformed their strategy. Training centers were established in hidden valleys where survivors learned to achieve the specific neural state that maximized disruption. They called the tactic ghost running after studying indigenous hunting techniques that had nearly been lost to history. The first coordinated ghost running operation targeted a VEX processing center in what had been Seattle. 50 runners created a pattern of neural interference that caused VEX units to lose coordination, while 20 strikers armed with primitive weapons attacked with coordinated precision. They succeeded in freeing 300 captives, but the cost was high. 17 runners collapsed from exhaustion, and 6 strikers died in the assault. As Alina helped treat the survivors, many suffering from extreme dehydration and stress injuries, a young woman grabbed her arm. "Something happened during the run," she said, eyes wide. "I could feel the others running with me, not see them, feel them, like we were connected." Similar reports came from other ghost runners, dismissed initially as hallucinations from extreme exertion, but Alina noted them carefully in her bark journal, seeing a pattern emerge that defied conventional science. The runners weren't just disrupting the VEX network. Somehow, they were creating one of their own. As survivors celebrated their first significant victory, no one noticed that the neural changes enabling ghost running were becoming permanent, subtly altering human biology with each mission. Evolution, once measured in millennia, was now occurring in months, driven by the most extreme selection pressure humanity had ever faced. The first reports seemed like stress-induced delusions. Ghost runners claimed they could feel other runners' exhaustion. Strikers somehow knew exactly where their teammates were without visual contact. Scouts described smelling VEX units from impossible distances, hearing conversations miles away. Alina initially dismissed these accounts as combat hallucinations until she experienced it herself during a narrow escape from a VEX patrol. Running through pitch-black forest at night, she navigated perfectly despite the darkness, somehow aware of every tree root and obstacle before touching it. When she reached the safety of the cave system serving as their temporary base, she couldn't explain how she'd done it. "Your eyes," Marcus said, examining her with a flickering firelight. "The pupils, they're different." In the Resistance's hidden medical facility, a repurposed mining tunnel equipped with salvaged equipment powered by water turbines, Alina examined brain scans of veteran ghost runners. What she saw defied conventional neuroscience. Neural pathways traditionally segregated were showing unprecedented cross-communication. Most shocking were the changes to the pineal gland, traditionally linked to circadian rhythms, but now pulsing with activity. "We're not just remembering what evolution made us," Alina explained to a council of resistance leaders 2 weeks later. "We're awakening capabilities that have always been dormant. The extreme pressure of fighting the VEX is triggering epigenetic changes, activating ancestral genes that haven't expressed in thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years." "What kind of capabilities?" asked a skeptical former geneticist. "It varies by population and environment," Alina replied, unfolding maps marked with different colored symbols. Coastal communities report enhanced balance, underwater vision, and the ability to hold their breath for over 6 minutes. Desert groups require 50% less water than before and regulate body temperature in extreme heat. Mountain clans demonstrate blood oxygen efficiency that lets them function at elevations that would have incapacitated them before the invasion. Most dramatic were the changes in children born after the invasion. A 5-year-old girl in the Appalachian community could intuitively communicate with wildlife, understanding animal behavior patterns without training. Twin boys in the Siberian Resistance could locate VEX units by sensing electromagnetic disturbances. A teenager in the Andes had developed skin that subtly changed color to match surroundings. Through their network of human messengers who memorized and carried information between resistance cells, Admiral Chen confirmed the pattern was global. Humanity wasn't just adapting tactics, it was adapting biology. "It's not random," Alina insisted as she studied tissue samples from different populations. These changes are precisely what each group needs to survive in their environment. Somehow, our bodies are accessing ancestral adaptations buried deep in our genetic code. The Vex response was swift and terrifying. New Vex units equipped with biological components derived from processed humans deployed specialized weapons, aerosol compounds designed to target the neurochemical changes enabling human adaptations. The first attack decimated a resistance stronghold in the Amazon, leaving survivors neurologically damaged, their emerging abilities erased. But in the Australian outback, something unexpected happened. Survivors exposed to a partial dose of the Vex bioweapon experienced accelerated neurological change rather than degradation. Their pineal glands nearly doubled in size within days, and they began demonstrating the ability to detect and briefly disrupt Vex communications with concentrated mental effort alone. No need for physical exertion. "They've made a critical mistake," Elena told Chen through their messenger network. "By targeting our awakening abilities, they've provided the catalyst for even more dramatic expression. It's like they're forcing our evolution into overdrive." On the remains of a satellite phone, she recorded her hypothesis. Humans evolved not just for persistence hunting, but for remarkable adaptation to environmental pressure. Our genetic code contains dormant capabilities we evolved, but never needed to express, until now. The Vex aren't fighting against what we are. They're fighting against what we were always meant to become. As reports of accelerating changes flooded in from resistance cells worldwide, Elena's journal entries became increasingly urgent. The most common development, emerging in almost every population under stress, was the ability to connect with other humans during moments of extreme danger. Not telepathy as science fiction had imagined it, but something more primal, a shared awareness that had once helped human hunting parties coordinate without language. What the Vex couldn't understand was that their bioweapons weren't stopping human evolution. They were directing it. 3 years into the occupation, Elena woke drenched in sweat, heart racing, the 4th night in a row with the same dream. She had seen through others' eyes. A man traversing an Arctic ice field, a woman hiding in a flooded subway tunnel, children perched in massive baobab trees watching crystalline ships pass below. When she described these visions to others in her resistance cell, they revealed they'd experienced the same dreams. Then the fevers began. It started with the ghost runners, their temperatures spiking to 104 degrees Fahrenheit after missions, accompanied by vivid hallucinations that seemed synchronized across different individuals. Soon, the phenomenon spread through resistance communities worldwide. Initial fear of a Vex bioweapon gave way to something more startling when Elena analyzed brain tissue from fever victims who didn't survive the neurological stress. "It's us, not them," she explained to a messenger who would carry her findings to Admiral Chen. "Our brains are rewiring themselves. The fever is a side effect of massive neural reorganization. The pineal gland is growing new connections to areas of the brain traditionally associated with social processing and empathy. Through painful trial and error, they learned to manage the fever. Those who survived emerged transformed. Humans in proximity began experiencing awareness of each other's emotional states, physical conditions, and eventually, surface thoughts. The phenomenon wasn't telepathy as science fiction had imagined it. It was limited, inconsistent, and worked best among people with strong emotional bonds or those who had run ghost patterns together. But it enabled something revolutionary: coordination without technology. In the Carpathian Mountains, a resistance cell ambushed a Vex patrol with unprecedented synchronization. Fighters moving in perfect complement without hand signals or verbal communication. In the Congolese rainforest, separated human groups converged simultaneously on a Vex processing facility from different directions, their timing impeccable despite no communication technology. Most telling was the sudden ability of humans to sense Vex movements before they occurred, as if their collective awareness allowed pattern recognition beyond what individual minds could achieve. Elena documented the phenomenon in her journal, now kept on handmade paper with ink derived from local plants. "We've developed our own version of their hive mind, but fundamentally different. Theirs sacrifices individuality for perfect coordination. Ours preserves individual consciousness while allowing shared awareness, like an improvisational dance where each dancer remains distinct but moves in harmony with others. The Vex noticed the change when their casualty rates increased dramatically. Their capture operations encountered resistance forces that seemed to anticipate their movements with impossible accuracy. After a particularly devastating defeat where an entire Vex battalion was destroyed by a much smaller human force in the ruins of Hong Kong, their response was drastic and unexpected. Across the planet, Vex ground forces simultaneously withdrew to their ships. For 3 days, resistance cells celebrated what they believed was retreat, until the orbital bombardment began. Precision energy weapons targeted known resistance strongholds, vaporizing entire mountain ranges and forest canopies harboring human communities. As her cell's cave network collapsed around them, Alina led survivors deeper underground through passages too narrow for adults to navigate normally. But in the fever dream state, their movements synchronized perfectly, bodies contorting through openings that should have been impossible, guided by their shared awareness of the space. Emerging miles away as the mountains behind them were reduced to rubble, Alina felt the deaths of those who didn't escape, not as abstract knowledge, but as phantom pain through the growing neural network connecting survivors. Each loss weakened and strengthened them simultaneously, weakening their numbers while strengthening their connection. That night, huddled in a new hiding place as Vex ships continued their systematic destruction of the surface, Alina felt something unprecedented ripple through the fever dream network, a message not in words, but in pure intention, originating from somewhere in the Himalayas. Admiral Chen had survived, and he had a plan. The message spread from mind to mind, requiring no technology that the Vex could intercept. As Alina slipped into exhausted sleep, the fever dream showed her millions of survivors simultaneously receiving the same vision. Humans running in coordinated patterns across the planet, creating a disruption field the Vex could not overcome. The final phase of their evolution was about to begin. The orbital bombardment continued for weeks, systematically eradicating resistance strongholds. Humanity faced extinction. In this darkest hour, Alina experienced a fever dream more vivid than any before. She saw Admiral Chen standing atop a Himalayan peak as bombardment reduced the mountains around him to rubble. Before the dream ended, he locked eyes with her and whispered a single word: synchronize. Alina woke with a revelation that spread through the fever dream network without need for messengers. If individual ghost runners could disrupt Vex communications, a planetary-scale neural surge might temporarily disable their entire system. The plan was both simple and desperate. Through the collective consciousness, survivors everywhere received the same instructions. On the summer solstice, when solar activity would provide additional electromagnetic interference, all remaining humans would simultaneously enter the ghost-running neural state. For weeks beforehand, survivors prepared physically and mentally. Those too injured or ill to run would serve as anchors, using their fever-enhanced minds to help stabilize the neural patterns of others. Children, whose adaptations had progressed furthest, would form the cores of each community's effort. As the day arrived, Alina stood in a deep cave in the Appalachians with 200 others. Similar groups gathered in hidden locations across every continent. At the predetermined moment, they began, not just running, but entering a rhythmic, almost trance-like state of coordinated movement. Their enhanced neural systems synchronized, amplifying the effect exponentially. Across the planet, 3 million humans simultaneously achieved the ghost-running neural state. The collective consciousness that had been growing for months suddenly flared like a supernova, a psychic beacon visible not to eyes but to minds. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Vex ships faltered in orbit, their energy weapons powering down mid-firing sequence. Communication between Vex units collapsed entirely. In this moment of vulnerability, the second phase began. Strike teams that had been hiding in the ruins of major cities emerged with weapons representing humanity's new paradigm. Technologically simple but devastatingly effective, when wielded by humans with enhanced abilities. They carried handcrafted explosive compounds packed into clay vessels, composite bows with carbon fiber arrows salvaged from sporting goods stores, and titanium spears forged from aircraft debris. As disabled Vex ships drifted in low orbits or made emergency landings, strike teams boarded them using climbing equipment and sheer physical prowess. What followed wasn't the technological battle the Vex had anticipated, but close-quarters combat, where human adaptability, improvisational thinking, and shared awareness proved devastating against the aliens' rigid programming. Elena led a strike team infiltrating what they had identified through the collective consciousness as the Vex command ship hovering over the ruins of London. As ghost runners outside maintained the neural disruption field, her team fought through crystalline corridors, facing increasingly desperate resistance. In the ship's central chamber, they discovered the truth. The Vex were not truly alien but biological machines created by a long-extinct species. Central memory cores revealed their programming. They traveled the galaxy harvesting adaptable species and integrating their biological advantages, but could not themselves evolve. Humanity's threat wasn't just our adaptability, but our potential to develop a collective consciousness that maintained individuality, something their creators never achieved before extinction. As the ghost runners outside began to collapse from neural exhaustion, Elena made a desperate decision. Instead of destroying the command core as planned, she interfaced with it directly, using her fever-enhanced neural patterns to upload a modified version of the human collective consciousness algorithm. The Vex system, designed to absorb biological innovations, could not resist integrating this radically different form of hive communication. As the algorithms spread through their network, Vex units worldwide froze in place, caught in an evolutionary leak their systems could not process. Through her connection to the Vex mainframe, Elena saw the truth of what they were facing. The Vex weren't conquering Earth. They were fleeing something worse, harvesting adaptability to survive against a greater threat from deep space. Humanity had just defeated the harbingers of a war they didn't yet understand. As she broke the connection, blood trickling from her nose, Elena sensed Admiral Chen's consciousness touch hers briefly across thousands of miles. His message wasn't in words, but in shared understanding. Victory had changed humanity forever, in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. The silent Vex ships hovered motionless above Earth's scarred surface, massive crystalline monuments to a battle won, but at devastating cost. Nearly a third of the ghost runners died during the running fire, their neural systems overwhelmed by the effort. Countless others fell during the boarding actions. But for the first time in 4 years, humanity emerged from hiding into a world without hunters. In the aftermath, the fever dream network intensified rather than faded. Children born after the invasion demonstrated unprecedented abilities. They could access the collective consciousness at will without the physical strain experienced by adults. Communities rebuilding from ruins discovered they could coordinate complex tasks with minimal verbal communication. Knowledge spread organically through the network. A farming innovation in New Zealand became available to survivors in Argentina within days, with no technology required for transmission. But with victory came division. 2 distinct paths for humanity's future emerged. Admiral Chen, bearing physical and psychological scars from years of resistance leadership, feared what humanity was becoming. Speaking to a council of survivors gathering in the ruins of Geneva, he presented salvaged Vex medical technology that could potentially reverse the neural changes. "We fought to remain human," he argued passionately. "These changes were necessary for survival, but now threaten the individual consciousness that defines us. If we continue on this path, in generations we'll be unrecognizable, a hive mind, no different from what the Vex intended to create." Elena, now revered almost religiously by many survivors for her role in the victory, led the opposition. She entered the council chambers with children born during the occupation, their eyes reflecting a depth and awareness that unsettled many observers. "What arrogance to assume humanity is a finished product," she challenged, her voice carrying through the hall, while her thoughts resonated in the minds of those present simultaneously. We didn't defeat the Vex by remaining static. We defeated them by embracing our most fundamental evolutionary trait: adaptability. The debate split communities worldwide. Some embraced Chen's vision of restored traditional humanity, using the Vex medical technology to dampen their neural connectivity. Others followed Alina's path, establishing settlements where the fever dream network was cultivated and strengthened. Unlike many historical divisions, this one remained largely peaceful. Both groups could sense each other's authentic concerns through their shared consciousness, making demonization impossible. 5 years after victory, Alina stood on a hillside overlooking one of the new model settlements. Below, children played in fields around buildings constructed with uncanny efficiency by people working in perfect coordination. She watched as a young girl fell and scraped her knee. Instantly, several adults turned toward her, sensing her pain, but they didn't rush over immediately. Instead, they waited, monitoring through their shared awareness as the child decided to handle the minor injury herself. The balance struck Alina most: collective awareness without the loss of individual agency. An old man joined her on the hillside. Admiral Chen, his once military bearing now softened with age. They'd maintained respectful communication despite their differing paths. "I still worry what we're becoming," he admitted, watching the community below. Alina smiled. "That's the point, Wei. We become what we need to be. That's what evolution made us, not just physically adaptable, but mentally and socially adaptable too. We can change without losing our essence." As they spoke, a sound like crystal bells resonated through the valley. The modified Vex ships, now partially controlled by human interfaces, detecting something at the edge of the solar system. In orbit and on the ground, humans simultaneously accessed the sensor data through their enhanced consciousness. Massive objects decelerating, their signatures matching Vex harvester fleets but with different configurations. "They're coming to see what happened to the harvester fleet," Chen observed. "More advanced models, from the readings." Alina nodded, feeling the collective consciousness of humanity already beginning to process the threat. Thousands of minds simultaneously analyzing the data and developing countermeasures. "Good," she said simply. "We'll show them what evolution really means." As twilight fell, the first stars became visible, one moving against the cosmic background, growing gradually brighter as it approached Earth. But unlike 4 years ago, humanity didn't watch in fear of the unknown. They watched with the calm confidence of a species that had discovered its greatest strength. When cornered, we remember what evolution made us: beings capable of becoming whatever we need to be to survive.